Happy Friday. Today we have an interesting philosophical discussion with one of the lead community managers from Taiko. We discussed their base sequencing design, the public goods versus profit-seeking mentality, things like eigenlayer, Ethereum alignment, and how this affects your design choices as a builder. We really enjoyed this light conversation and hope to do more ideological conversations in the future. Hope you guys enjoy. Welcome back to The Roll-Up. We are here today to talk about some of the interesting concepts in Web3, the Web3 moral compass, Ethereum alignment, modularity, and a couple of other interesting topics that we think are pressing right now. Here today with Rob, of course, and Alex from Taiko. Got to know the Taiko team quite well. But Alex, would love to have a quick intro and what you do at Taiko and what you're passionate about in Web3 crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm working with Taiko. I'm the community manager there, but it's not just community. Working in this space, you kind of deal with a little bit of everything. There's like the people side of it. There's the ecosystem side of it. There's the overall, protocol design part of things where, you really have to understand what's going on in the background and behind the scenes to be able to communicate that to people. So it's a really interesting spot that keeps me really busy. So there's lots and lots that I can talk about.
Yeah, and hoping to get into some of the more like philosophical questions that you see in the community, and not just the Taiko community, but the Ethereum community at large. And so we see a lot of positioning on the Ethereum moral compass in terms of alignment or intentional misalignment. And so I'm curious, just like from a first principles standpoint, like how do you see this idea of Ethereum, like not just Ethereum alignment, but like what does that mean? Like what is Ethereum's moral compass, and then why does it make sense to align or not with that?
Right. That's a really good question. So Ethereum alignment is one thing, and I think like Ethereum's like moral compass is slightly another thing. I think Ethereum alignment can be, it's usually more of a technical thing. It can be a little philosophical, but I feel like the moral compass thing is just purely like this philosophical aspect of, basically asking the question of what are we doing here? Like what are most of the people on here doing? What's the whole point? Why are we building all of these systems, all of these networks? Why are all of these people, some of the smartest people in the world spending their time, to work on this kind of stuff? So the moral compass question is really asking like, okay, what are we doing with all of this tech? What are we doing with decentralized technology? And so, you see the conversation kind of crop up around, meme coins and, the overall kind of like degen mindset, which, again, isn't inherently like a good or a bad thing, as you can see in like Vitalik's like, blog post about, Ethereum's moral compass and all that. He basically brings up the point of like, these are like human behaviors, like human mindsets that we have of, like who doesn't like to get rich, who doesn't want to make more money and all that. And I think it's really just asking, again, that question of like, how do we take those motivations and like understandings of like general human nature, and how do we tweak it to be the best? It's really easy to kind of stand on the sidelines and be a vocal opponent of, again, things that people see like meme coins, just chasing, the latest hype and all that. I think, when you put the question in less of a negative like spotlight and you just more ask of like, what can we do with this? like you can see in the article that Vitalik wrote, he kind of lays out and points out that you can utilize this to do effective things for people. Again, to raise for charity, to funnel this money to people and things and organizations that really need it, to really make a difference. So yeah, it's that's like one side of the whole conversation of like, what are we doing and like what's the whole point of this? And then Ethereum alignment is a really big question because it plays into the more like technical aspects of like when you're building some of these networks and distributed systems, it's asking how close to like the Ethereum ethos of like decentralization, security, permissionlessness, and what's the last one? And well, speed, really, scaling. And so that's when you have like, for example, you see like a plethora of like L2s and rollups and ZK EVMs, ZK VMs, and along that you'll see the whole spectrum of like how Ethereum aligned are they. So it goes from everything to how decentralized and how permissionless are these things, all the way to how is your sequencer or proposer network set up. Are you funneling that money back up to the Ethereum network itself, like the Ethereum ecosystem of like validators and node runners, or are you extracting that money and giving it back to like a more centralized like company or organization? So it's a really big and open-ended topic about how like important is Ethereum alignment and where do you start drawing lines at the end of the day in protocol design to basically say like we need to make this viable for like a business. So it's really asking, are you trying to build a protocol or are you trying to build a business? And I think those are some of those questions that you see crop up around like Ethereum alignment itself.
Yeah. And are we thinking that Ethereum alignment is quite a bit of a meme now, but are we thinking that it has to do with building censorship resistant and resilient systems in the way which kind of Satoshi and Vitalik and other leaders have built? Or is it more of a question of like a profit mindset? Because ultimately I view Ethereum as like one of the weaknesses of Ethereum right now is like the lack of censorship resistance compared to something like Bitcoin, where as much as I want to say Ethereum could never go down, I think that there could be some three-letter agencies that cause problems. So, like, are we thinking of Ethereum alignment for censorship resistance, for profit maximalism versus public goods? Like, let's break this down further into kind of like the subcategories here.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, you do have like the business side of things again, like how is like profit alignment and things like that enabled, but then it all really starts off with that question of building like a resilient, decentralized system. That I think is sort of like the first and foremost like topic, and it's the thing that people talk about the most. I think when you're talking about like the overall organizational structure of like a company behind layer 2 protocol, for example, I think that's been one of the topics that's just a little less like talked about, again, because it's the first and foremost thing that people again are talking about is, well, is this even like, what's the point of building this, right? Like if you don't have censorship resistance, if you don't have decentralization, you're not following these tenets of like, again, like Satoshi and Vitalik and like the things that they've built up, you don't have like it's basically, you don't have like a system that really makes sense. So that's the first point of asking, like, does this even make sense to do? It's like if you have like a roll up that goes down or doesn't inherit any of the security from Ethereum, is there even a point for it being a roll up? Is it better to be its own thing? And I think those are a lot of the questions that a lot of the smart people in the space are asking first, because it's a lot of engineering and it's a lot of like technical types of problems where it's really even asking like, where should we be building? What are we building? And I think if your protocol and project isn't very Ethereum aligned, it really doesn't make sense to be like an L2, right? If you're not inheriting Ethereum's security, what's the whole point? It would be better just to spin up your own project, your own chain, or your own part of like a modular blockchain that you're just focusing on one sole aspect. So yeah, that's the thing that people talk about the most. It's just really about why are we building here, and does it even make sense to build on Ethereum? What does it mean to build on Ethereum?
Yeah, and I think it is quite helpful to separate the ethical alignment of Ethereum and then the technical alignment with Ethereum. And
Right,
so,
yeah.
as you mentioned, like there's quite a few principles, right? You got censorship resistance, permissionlessness, decentralization, all of those ethical properties that Ethereum has. And the cool thing is that you can have all of those ethical alignment properties with Ethereum and the community at large, but you don't have to have the technical alignment. And so if I want to run my own blockchain, not necessarily like kind of pay rent, we'll kind of maybe get into like what that really means when it comes to paying rent to Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say I don't want to align with like the users, the economic security, the validator set, the liquidity landscape. I can kind of like build my own blockchain, as you mentioned, and that's a pattern that we're seeing more and more projects take. Build their own blockchain, take ownership of their own block space, not be technically aligned with Ethereum, but still maintain a lot of the ethical alignment, a lot of the ethical properties that Ethereum has in their own chain, and reflect those ethical properties in their community despite the lack of technical alignment.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think Eigenlayer AVSs
so?
and the extension of restaked ETH to create new chains and new AVSs kind of just blows this whole idea of like Ethereum alignment out of the water, because you're just automatically an extension of the Ethereum network, but you can go and do all these different things. You're still reliant on Ethereum, but and on the restaked ETH and the validator set, but it almost like it begs the question, like, at what point does being ideologically aligned with any given technology inhibit your ability to build shit that people want to use that actually changes the world? And I'll pass it over to you, Alex. I know that you had a thought, but I just wanted to chime in there on Rob's point.
Yeah. So to that, Eigenlayer is a great example because it's super unique and it's super novel and innovative. And something like Eigenlayer really blurs the lines between what is ethical and ideological alignment and what is technical alignment. And so, like, Vitalik wrote that blog post called "Don't Overuse Social Consensus." And so, just like, let's focus on social consensus for a moment. That is one functionality of Ethereum that is really in the middle of like a technical feature and an ideological feature. It's the idea that everyone can pool their tokens, use them to vote, and then whatever we vote on is the outcome of the chain. And the best example of that in Ethereum's case is Ethereum Classic, when all of the Ethereum token holders voted on whether or not to fork the chain and blacklist those Ethereum tokens that were stolen. Obviously, we ended up doing that. Ethereum Classic exists, and that was a very costly hard fork. Like, Ethereum Classic still has a market cap of 5 billion or something like that. And so the mission or the purpose of that article, as I take it, was basically to say, like, we can't extend the Ethereum social consensus, whether you call that like an ideological feature or a technical feature, it shouldn't apply to these things that are built on top of or aside from Ethereum itself. And so yeah, Eigenlayer is super, super aligned with Ethereum, the asset, like ETH as money and using it as economic stake. It has a lot of technical alignment. And I do think that there are a lot of ideological alignment properties that Eigenlayer and Ethereum agree on. The one place where I think they might diverge is this social consensus element, where Eigenlayer is going to end up taking its own social consensus. It'll end up having the Eigen token, and that's what we'll use for any sort of disagreements on the Eigenlayer protocol.
Yeah. Again, yeah, it's this topic of alignment. It's really broad. Again, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, again, social consensus, like actual like technical alignment. And again, it's like that Ethereum ethos. So again, it's not to say that any like not being like, for example, like Ethereum aligned is like a bad thing or anything like that. It's again, these are all like open-ended questions. You know, nobody knows if Ethereum is like the end-all be-all of, you know, distributed networks and, you know, cryptocurrency itself. Like, it's still an open-ended question. So it's really good to have, again, like projects like Eigenlayer and all that, really testing like the boundaries of what you can do with this technology. And again, it's not a bad thing. I really think there's like there's good value in pushing the boundaries and testing things, especially with Ethereum. Ethereum is supposed to be a resilient permissionless system. So when you have that, you really have to test out all edge cases. So a big part again is like how far can you push social consensus? When does it go too far? When are the lines drawn? Again, when does it start to affect the overall trajectory of the protocol itself? And those are questions yet to be answered. So I think everybody, and that's the thing in the space, is everybody that's building, I genuinely feel like has good intentions for it. I don't think anybody's ever building a protocol to go and destroy Ethereum. I feel like that was maybe the vibe in like 2016, 2017 with all those, the ICOs and all the other like, alt layers and stuff like that kind of popping up and, side chains, all competing. But, I feel like we're really getting to the point where everybody's just really, there's been so much like technical foundation laid out that's been like untested and like unquestioned and unexplored that it's really, you just see like good honest efforts of people really trying to see again like the limitations of this space in general. So yeah, I think it's important to have projects that like Eigenlayer that kind of extend some of that. And again, they're aligned in some ways, but maybe not others. But it's really good to see where that's going to end up leading.
Let's get into this question of rent that Ethereum is charging for certain functionalities that it provides the applications on top. Like Eigenlayer, is choosing to like kind of rent out the ETH asset as this economic stake, and AVSs are going to end up paying something for the stakers to stake their ETH, and they're going to do that in terms of rewards that they'll pay to the stakers for taking on like a slashing risk. And so the AVSs on top of Eigenlayer are basically paying rent to these Ethereum stakers, whether they're liquid stakers or restakers. So that's one aspect of Ethereum that's kind of like for sale or for rent is probably a better way to put it. The social consensus is something that Vitalik has said, like, that's not even for sale. That's not for rent. You can't really buy that. But for the things that you can rent out, right, you can use the Ethereum sequencer. You have to pay something to Ethereum to use that sequencer. Same thing with the economic stake. You have to kind of pay Ethereum stakers to use that stake for economic security. Like, when does it make sense to build something in-house or like take ownership of your own sequencer or launch your own chain with your own token as economic security? When does it make sense to do that yourself? Or when does it make sense to pay Ethereum to use Ethereum solution?
That's a really good question, because you hear that rent conversation kind of crop up around like MEV and things like that, and so that plays a really big aspect when designing something like a roll-up, right? When you're asking like, okay, where do we want all of like that MEV flow to go, right? Is that something that we want to extract ourselves? Is that something that we want to pass on to, the Ethereum like validator set? And again, it all really depends on, and I think it touches upon that topic that I mentioned before, where it's really starting to look at like the organizational structures of some protocols and all that, where you really start to ask, is it like, okay, are we building like a decentralized protocol, or are we building and sustaining like a company that builds protocols and things like that? So, for example, you're going to ask this question when you're building a roll-up of like, okay, well, how are we going to extract value for our protocol itself, right? And there's that big question of, do we run our own sequencers, or do we pass that on as like a based roll-up? Do you pass that on to the Ethereum validator set? And so again, it's really asking that question of like Ethereum alignment, like how far does that go and where does that take you, right? Because what are you going to be using all of this, like, both if you're running your own sequencer and you're extracting MEV from like your users and basically, keeping that for yourself, not passing that on to, the Ethereum validator set, you're asking the question of like, what is this money for, right? It's, usually the plan is, send it to a treasury, a DAO, so then they can decide and implement, changes to the protocol so they can pay people to maintain things. And so, you have to have some level of economic security or protocol for it to exist, right? Like, why is anybody going to be here to help, actually keep the protocol going? Who's going to actually like code the changes, for these proposals and all that? And again, it's really, I think, this unexplored question that a lot of people have, barely touched the surface on and haven't really talked about too much, is just how much do you really need to keep a protocol like this going? And for example, it's like if you go like the based rollup route, and as a protocol yourself, you are not extracting MEV, right? Like, you're not running your own sequencer network, anything like that. Everything is run by the Ethereum validator set. So the L1 validator set is the ones who get to extract that MEV. So I think on one hand, it's that question of like, how do we want to support Ethereum itself, right? Like, we wouldn't be here without Ethereum. It's really helpful to, it's like a twofold thing, like we can, say that we have a decentralized like sequencer network, at the cost of paying L1, basically giving them that like MEV and, giving them all of those, that flow. And so that's, again, that's a big thing in Ethereum alignment about like, how do we want to support Ethereum? Like with Taiko, we've, with our token allocation, there's that, the PGP grant. It's the protocol guild pledge, where we allocate 1% of our tokens to the protocol guild itself, which directly, helps both like Ethereum's future, both in the development and how they can fund things like that, and Taiko's future itself. We really rely on Ethereum for existence. We couldn't exist without Ethereum itself. So when taking that like choice of not, finding ways to like extract value, for our protocol itself, how can you actually guarantee that there's going to be any help or interest or money in the Taiko protocol itself? And I think when you start building something that's so Ethereum aligned that it doesn't feel separate from Ethereum, it feels like an extension of Ethereum, you can actually get these like non-monetary benefits, right? Like, we're not getting all of this money and, putting it into a treasury, but you have like this developer mind share, right? When you align yourself with like the Ethereum, like, core principles and like ideals and like the general philosophy, you're, on one hand, you're going to get a lot of people that are just really interested in building stuff on Ethereum, for Ethereum, these like, really hardcore like Ethereum aligned developers that their interest is peaked in this, right? They want to see this thing, be built out. They want to participate. I've personally seen, developers just coming on board because they like the principles of what the project's doing and how we're going about it, that they just take their own time and effort to try and find ways to make things better on their own end, because they're like, oh, hey, this is super sick. Like, I see this that I want to improve. Like, I just want to see that get done. And I think that's a really important part in this whole space, is getting like, philosophically aligned with the whole Ethereum like community and developer ecosystem, because it's a really robust and powerful group of people that are really driven, from what I've seen, less about money and more about, again, like principles and like the change that they can make. So when you have a roll up or something, any kind of project that really just feels like Ethereum extended, you really don't have to worry as much. And this is all in my opinion. I really don't think you have to worry, as much about like the financialization of your protocol. You really have to, you're really going to get a lot of help from the Ethereum community as a whole. Again, like general mind share of like developers, people working on stuff. And the really cool thing, again, is when you have a project that is just, it's Ethereum extended, it really doesn't look different from Ethereum itself. Like, the changes that affect Ethereum also affect like your L2, your roll up. So you're really getting as much as you can from the Ethereum L1, from like upstream changes, things like that, adjustments to, like, for example, like EIP 4844, where that just makes L2s a lot cheaper. And you don't have to be super Ethereum aligned for that or anything like that. But these kinds of things, these changes, this work is already being done for you if you can already adapt and like, bring all of these changes in, from upstream as easily as you can. So yeah, sorry, I've been rambling a bit, but basically it's a really interesting question that I feel like I haven't even, had a lot of opportunity to talk to others to explore again. Like if you do have like a centralized model for your protocol and project, then that just opens up the next question of like, okay, when are things like hands off for us? Like when do we, let go of things so it's a little less like company controlled and it's more of that decentralized like DAO structure, right? I don't know if that's like the goal for all these other projects, but I know overall that's sort of the goal for L2s in general. Is like, okay, how can we decentralize this? How can we go more hands off with it? It's like for example, Ethereum, you have the Ethereum Foundation and all that, but you don't have, they're not the ones making the decisions really about the protocol. Again, that's the whole ecosystem of developers that are all, discussing and figuring out. It's like the whole distributed team of clients that are, that help run like Ethereum nodes and all that. Like those are the people that are really making a lot of the changes and a lot of like the choices behind the decisions about where, Ethereum should go and all that. And so I think that's the overall path that like layer twos are eventually going to take, where it's less one project and one company behind it that makes all of these changes, and it moves to a more decentralized sort of like DAO structure. And so when you have all of this centralized like infrastructure and all that, again, you're really asking the question, well, when do they make the transition? When do they let go of all this stuff? When do the sequencers get decentralized, right? Like what happens when this like company no longer wants to run these servers, to run these like nodes, provers, sequencers, whatever? What happens to the protocol itself? Is there infrastructure and technology there already built to decentralize it? When a protocol is looking to, extract MEV through their sequencer model and all that, it's like, what is that money going to? What's the point of it? And again, what happens when things want to be more decentralized, right? Where is that money going to go in the future? What is it being used for now? Does the company have plans to exist for a longer time to be more on top of this protocol and project? And again, it's just a lot of these questions that I think have been unanswered and sort of unexplored so far.
Yeah, it's this really, really interesting idea of public goods, I think, is a way to kind of sum this. It's like decentralized public goods. But it's just weird. It's this weird conversation where, like, Alex, I'll just ask you, like, are crypto companies supposed to make money? Are roll-ups supposed to operate as a organizational company business with a centralized sequencer? Or are they supposed to operate more like a network state of like a Bitcoin or of an Ethereum? And it's like, it's not that easy of a yes or no, but it becomes this question of like, where do we align the incentives?
Right, exactly. That was like a very beautiful and succinct way of putting my entire rant there. That was, yeah, that's exactly perfect. It's are we building public goods, or are we building a more, like structured company? When does decentralization, take effect? That's a really good way of putting it.
And for me, like Rob and I talked to a lot of teams, both on both sides. And when you speak to people, there's a clear differentiation in how they speak about crypto as a whole from these more like profit driven, less public good teams versus these more like, let's call them Ethereum aligned or kind of teams that are building technology for the sake of building the technology. But again, all people have to eat. And this is where you get into like the meme coins and the speculation, because it's like, well, this stuff is appealing to people because it's a byproduct of the decentralized openness of crypto markets. And so, like, are meme coins really a net negative? I don't know. Like, what is a bad use of good technology? And for us, it's almost like this never ending search, and it's exciting, and also just feels like there's always more unknowns.
No, totally. It's I mean, that's the beauty of working in a permissionless kind of space, as everybody has the freedom to do whatever they want, and nobody's forcing. And yeah, that's the whole point. There's no forcing anybody to do anything. So again, it's like, how can we, build off of like that Ethereum like social consensus of like, what do we want to see in this space? What do we want to build? Which direction do we want to take these things? And yeah, again, it just quickly touching back on what we were talking about, just about like public goods and whatnot. Again, I don't even think that there's like a right or wrong answer. Like we really don't know. We're in such an early state, because I'll go to conferences and stuff, and I'll talk to people about Taiko, and I'll talk to them about their protocols. And a lot of times they just have questions of like, well, if you guys aren't like extracting like MEV and running your own sequencer network, they're like, how are you going to make money? Like, how, that's a lot of money being missed out on. And I don't know. I guess that's just like it's the traditional business like world mindset and all that that's kind of merging with that public goods mindset. And yeah, there's a few ways to answer that question. I don't think, for example, like a protocol like Taiko needs to extract money from MEV from their sequencer network. You have everything from like of course there's going to be a token that's needed to help incentivize our prover proposer network and all that. But at the end of the day, if you look at how does every other project right now like basically capitalize on their project? Every project has a token. They're out there, they're freely traded, they're freely exchanged. They have pretty high market caps. So they use those mainly as a treasury. So you really, I don't see a single project right now out there that's supporting themselves purely off of like that, like rent extracting from their users. I don't see that as solely supporting any one project or protocol out there. And I think it's just one of those things that people immediately see and they're like, oh, you're just giving up all of this money. But at the end of the day, I really don't see it as like the make or break of a project. I know it's maybe the harder way of doing it, and it's kind of it's a harder sell for other people to tell them like, yeah, we're just, there's all this money on the table and we're not taking it. Again, it's just that mindset, and I guess that conversation that we need to have in this space as well. It's like, are we building public goods or are we building like private companies?
Yeah. And as we kind of wrap up here, Alex, just curious more about the current updates with Taiko for our community, how you guys are moving along towards mainnet, and just more ways that our community can get involved. I know that you guys have various different developer programs, grants for all types of builders. If people want to build an Ethereum aligned ecosystem, how can they do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things that like Taiko's doing like that we're doing on our own. So for example, we have like our grants program that's there. We have our community grants track, we have our developer grants track, and then we have a request for proposal track. So right now the developer, like our ecosystem grant track is open and our request for proposal track is open. And so that just means like if you come to Taiko and you just build an application or anything, it can be helpful to the infrastructure of the rollup if that's your expertise, or if it's just like a D app that's out there. It doesn't even have to be like crazy groundbreaking, like this crazy DeFi protocol. It's just, is it cool? Like, are people going to use it? Is it like novel? Is it fun? Is it like an interesting idea? Is it a game? Is it like some sort of like social fi? Is it like decentralized identity? Anything like that? We're here to provide grants to people that are here building stuff and making a concerted effort to just like build cool things that we haven't really seen in like the Web 2 world and all that. And then the request for proposal track is sort of like that, almost like really Ethereum aligned thing where you can implement, for example, like EIPs, but they're called TIPs, Taiko improvement proposals. And so what they are is they're cool things that we would like to see built into like the Taiko protocol itself, that people can just come by, if it falls in your wheelhouse of expertise, you can go through, basically write up a proposal of like, this is how I could implement this, and here's the timeline, and we'll give you a grant to build that out. And the cool thing is that when you build these things out for Taiko, and it's part of that like Ethereum alignment aspect, because we are just like Ethereum extended, like our protocol doesn't alter Ethereum itself too much, that these changes can actually go from Taiko upstream to Ethereum L1. So it doesn't have to just affect Taiko itself. So if you go through and you implement, a change for Taiko, and you get one of these requests for proposals completed, I mean, you're already making changes to Ethereum itself. Like whether or not the L1, accepts those changes or, actually wants to implement that into the protocol itself is a different question. But the fact that now anybody that, can fork Taiko and use those new upgrades, and again, that work has already been laid out and done, and that it's a very marginal change to get that implemented into Ethereum itself. So, participating in our request for like our proposals and all that, is almost like contributing to Ethereum itself, and yeah, overall, it just, contributing to Taiko itself, going into our GitHub, checking things out again, like we're very close to what Ethereum itself looks like. So any changes or any like contributions that you make there, you're really making to the overall Ethereum ecosystem. And then I know that I've seen them around that there's like roll-up improvement proposals, RIPs, and those are protocol changes that would affect like roll-ups as a whole. So just like the entire roll-up landscape, like pool adjustments and implementations, again, that would streamline like the layer 2, both like UX and general experience.
So much great stuff happening over on Taiko. Yeah, I like the analogy too, because by making changes and building things on Taiko, you have the opportunity to then roll that upstream to Ethereum L1. And so these rollups are almost like these like experimentation fields for Ethereum, which I think is really cool, because if you want to move fast and break things, do it on a rollup. You have more of a chance of getting implemented. And then if it ends up successful, Ethereum itself could end up adopting that standard. So awesome work so far. Thank you so much for coming on, Alex. And good luck. Have fun to the entire Taiko community.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and having me on here. I know these are big topics to discuss as a whole. So I hope I did my best answering all of these. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
Effective rambling.
Cheers, man.
All good. Thanks, man. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.